What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So we've got our first tips video here for the new Lenovo Legion Go 2. There's just some stuff I noted as I was getting through my first few days with the device that I think could help you out if you're not used to setting these up, or maybe some things you hadn't thought of or run into yet. So it might help with setup and other things as you get into your new Lenovo Legion Go 2, or maybe you don't have yours yet, you're just getting ready because they are still shipping these things out. But anyways, getting into it, the first thing that we're going to talk about is updates. So kind of obvious, but you do kind of need to check everywhere for your updates. Now, the first thing I do like to do is make sure all the Windows updates are done, at least when I first get the device, even if you want to pause things after that. And I didn't have any issues with this during my setup. Also, Windows Store is something you're going to want to make sure that you're updated on, especially when you first get the device. I had well over 30 updates in here when I first got this to get all the apps and programs up to date and working right, including Adrenaline software for AMD. So those two places are definitely where you want to keep things updated. Also, if you go into Legion Space, there's updates from Lenovo in there often for your device as well. So you go into your settings tab and into disk and drives. And then there's a check for updates button here. Now, I didn't have any updates yet at time of getting mine, so I haven't had anything else to show here, but we'll see if any pop up. But that's the third place that's good to keep an eye out. Now, also to make sure you are up to date with things from Lenovo, or to get something directly, you can use your quick access menu button here and go down to the question mark and online support. And this will take you over to the support site to detect your device and get your drivers. Now, you might have to install Lenovo Service Bridge, so keep an eye out for that pop-up. But I already have it on here, so it'll detect my Legion Go 2. We'll click that and we'll go over to the site, the support site for the product, and we'll scroll down. And what we're going to want to go into, of course, is drivers and software over here on the left. Now, we can do automatic scan for updates, but what I like to do usually is just go into manual updates and check the driver versions myself, or download whatever it is that I want to install, especially something like BIOS or GPU driver updates, which is something we're always wanting to get our hands on. And I am current on that now, and this is a good way to make sure you're actually running the proper driver from Lenovo if you're trying to run everything official. You can see we're on the .2002 here from AMD for the proper version from Lenovo, and if I want to check that, one thing I can do is go into system information, which we can get to through search here. And we'll go over to components. And we'll click that. It's kind of hard to do here, but we got it. And then down to display. And then that's going to bring up the actual Windows driver version. There's other ways to get to it, but I'm just used to doing it that way. And you'll see we're on the same version, driver .2002, and all the numbers are the same as well. So that works out there. And over in the Adrenaline app, that translate to this versions over here, which is actually a September 4th driver, which isn't that bad for Lenovo considering, and it's running all the games fine right now. So those are some important places to take care of your updates. Now, tip number 2 is going to be your VRAM. For some reason, this thing comes defaulted 2 gigabytes of VRAM, at least all the ones at launch have anyways. And I've changed mine to 10 for now. I'm doing some testing. Most games only run 4 to 8 on these handhelds, so 8, 10, or 12 is a pretty good spot to set it to, and you can check those here in Task Manager. But to change this, what we're going to want to do is go into BIOS. So we're going to go ahead and fully shut down the Legion Go 2 here. And once that's fully shut down, you see the volume buttons at the top. You're going to want to hold the up volume button and then turn on the Legion Go 2 and keep holding the volume button. You don't have to hold power, but keep holding the up volume button until you see the bright white menu pop up here that's going to have all your different options for the system. And we're going to want the second one down here, BIOS setup. Then on the bottom right here, you're going to see more settings. Tap on that, and we get into the BIOS menus right here. And about halfway down on the left, you'll see display settings. And right now, the only thing in there is the VRAM buffer size. I've set mine to 10, as I said, but do anything you want to do in here. I do recommend 8, 10, or 12 for this device right now, but do what works for you. But that's the easiest way to get in and go ahead and get that changed. Once you're done, exit saving changes right here. The device will restart, and then you'll have your new VRAM settings. You can check that in Task Manager if you want to, again, by going in here and to Performance, and you'll see the amount of RAM allocated to your VRAM and to your system. So that's how you get that changed over, and it certainly will help you with performance because that 2 gigabytes default it comes with is pretty rough. All right, our third tip is a pretty easy one, but it's going to be to go into your Adrenaline software and turn off VariBright. This is something that AMD has in their software that kind of controls the brightness of your screen based on content and stuff, and it's just something most of us rather have turned off. So anyway, in your Adrenaline software, however you decide to open that up there, you go over to your settings or your gear tab over here. We're going to go into display. course, we want to make sure our FreeSync Premium is on. We're going to scroll down, and then you'll see VariBright here. They usually default to 3 at balance, I believe it is, or 2. And you're going to want to slide that down to 0, which basically means off. So it's not going to affect any of your brightness or anything for the OLED or HDR during certain games or content. So I definitely recommend doing that, and it'll help you out. As far as that just changing on you, most people prefer that to be off. If it's something you do prefer, that's fine, but I definitely would recommend turning that off here. All right, and for tip number 4, back into the Adrenaline software here, we're going to set up some hotkeys that we can use easily on our shortcut buttons on the controllers to activate things like fluid motion frames, which is something you see here in graphics. Fluid motion frames 2.1, something I like to be able to toggle on and off while I'm in game with the back buttons on the controllers, along with stuff like the sidebar and the overlay from AMD as well, so we can see the proper frame rate for that pretty easily. So in our gear icon or our settings, if we go to hotkeys, you'll see all these kind of listed out here. You're going to want to click the little toggle up here to enable all these, and they should turn red on the last letter there. And like I said, I'm going to do the sidebar and the performance overlay and fluid motion frames 2.1 hotkeys on the back buttons of the controllers, so these are really easy to use on here. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get these set up by going into Legion Space. We're going to go to our controllers tab, and we're going to go to button mapping here on the bottom left. And then we're going to be in our gamepad mode, so we're going to do view, edit, layout in the gamepad mode up here. Got that. And then we're going to go ahead and change to rear view so we can change the back buttons and what they are shortcutted to. All right, so what I'm going to do is set my sidebar to the top button right here. I'm just going to tap on that. We're going to want to go all the way over to key combinations, and we're going to put in the key combination for that, which was Alt-Z. Then we're going to press Y to confirm it, and that'll save it on that button. So there we have the Alt-Z. All right, the next one I want to throw on here is going to be the performance overlay, Control-Shift-O. So we're going to go back to Legion Space, pick my next button, key combination, and then we're going to do Control-Shift and O, and then Y to save the command. And then you'll see that on our other middle button on the right controller here. And then next I'm going to do Fluid Motion Frames 2.1, which is the Alt-Shift-G. So I'm going to use my bottom button on my left controller here. You can put these wherever you want to. Key combination, we're going to do the Alt-Shift-G, and that's going to be for our fluid motion frames. Y to save it. And now we have all 3 of those in there, the sidebar, fluid motion frames, and the overlay that we can easily bring up with our buttons. So there's the sidebar we programmed in there. And then on the other side on the middle, we have the overlay we can bring up. And then when we jump into a game, we'll be able to use the other button on the other controller to swap our fluid motion frames, which we'll get into there. But yeah, no problems with these working. Oh, I had this set up on the Z1 Extreme Go as well. So this was pretty easy to go ahead and set up and get going. But here in Outer Worlds 2, if we want to take a look at these things toggling, we have our sidebar option here that'll pop up for us. And then we can just take that away. And then we have our overlay, which is going to make us crouch here, but that's fine. And we click that and we can get the AMD overlay. Now, if I click our other button that we programmed for Fluid Motion Frames 2.1, we'll get that to pop up here, and then we can use the AMD overlay to see that frame rate. So my custom overlay shows the base frame rate the game stays running at, and then AMD's overlay has the actual frame rate of the Fluid Motion frames running. So 79 and 39, 40 there for those. So that's really handy to be able to do, to have their overlay, pop that up and down if you want to check anything, easily swap fluid motion frames on and off, and of course access your sidebar. Those are pretty convenient, so I would recommend setting up those hotkeys and setting up those shortcuts on whatever buttons work best for you there to be able to easily bring these up. But yeah, it's definitely a more convenient way I found on the original Go and on this one now to kind of navigate around and use the app. All right, so the final and 5th tip is going to be about HDR, because we do have this beautiful OLED display here that does support HDR, and I've set up one of my front buttons here to swap HDR on and off, because I don't personally like HDR in Windows or on the desktop, but I do like it in a lot of the games, especially on this display. So I have that easily able to be toggled on and off, which I'll show you how we set up and get to that. But first off, we want to go into Settings, and we're going to go into System and Display. And you'll see an HDR tab right here that we're going to click on that to open up the HDR settings. And then we have some options in here as far as turning this on or off, auto HDR and calibration. So the first thing is we're going to want to expand this menu and uncheck the turn off HDR when PC is on battery. That way you can use HDR when on battery, and of course allow HDR streaming while HDR is off. You can turn that on or off, your preference there. But definitely turn off the toggle for the battery one. So we're going to go ahead and turn this on. It'll toggle HDR on. We'll actually get some more settings that'll pop up here once that's finished and loads in. There we go. Now you're going to see auto HDR pop up down here as well, which I recommend having on. That way games like JSAUX that we'll take a look at that don't have native HDR get auto HDR support, and it looks really nice on the OLED as well. All right, so you can easily turn that on and off, and again, we'll set up that toggle as well. And then HDR display calibration. Not everybody's necessarily going to choose to do this. You can just run the default settings, but if you click on that, it'll take you to the Windows Store to download an app that will easily take you through calibration if you want to calibrate the HDR for your display. So not too hard to do if you want to jump into that as well. All right, so go into Legion Space if you want to make that toggle button. Go into Controllers, Button Mapping, and then I chose the bottom front left. So go into View, Edit, Layout here, and then you'll see that pop up. And you'll see I have Win-Alt-B over on the left bottom button of the controller. Win-Alt-B is the shortcut button for toggling HDR on and off in Windows. So I just programmed that as a key combination to that face button, so I can just super easy toggle HDR on and off. So if you just click on that and do the key combination like you saw earlier in the video, put in the Win-Alt-B here, hit Y to save the command. You can save that to any button you want and be able to easily toggle your HDR, which makes it really handy to use, especially if you're like me and you don't necessarily want it on all the time, but you like to use it when you're about to launch a game. And if we go into JSAUX, we actually have auto HDR that works here. I don't have a great setup to show you how good that looks or anything, but it's convenient to turn HDR on before you jump into a game, get it set up in the game and enjoy it. And when you're done, you can turn HDR off if you want to. Now, if you turn it off in game, you'll get a warning that things need to be changed. You do need to restart to get things proper. Again, it'll mess with your colors and stuff. But if you do it before launch and then you're done, you turn it off, you'll be good to go. So yeah, auto HDR and the toggling and everything, make sure you get into all that and enjoy the HDR and what you have here on the Legion Go 2 and that OLED display, because it definitely is a showcase feature of the device. But that'll do it here, guys. That's 5 tips for your new Lenovo Legion Go 2. I'm sure I'll have plenty more stuff coming up, plus game tests, comparisons, and the whole review and everything coming for the Legion Go 2. So anyways, if you haven't already, subscribe, like, and comment, and let me know what you guys think. And as always, thanks a lot for coming and check out the video. I really appreciate it. I'll see you guys in the next one.